If someone you respected in the aquarium industry invited you to jump into a busy shipping harbor with trash, seaweed, and a ton of current, would you say yes? Well, I did, and I found myself in the hands of industry veteran Colin Foord, who zipped me through the port of Miami while dodging some really big freighters to end up here where he said corals are growing. All right, Colin, you got me out here. I'm all yours. Colin, I'm sitting here in Port of Miami, right here on the jetty. I'm thinking dirty water. You don't want to swim here, but you're telling me I'm completely wrong.
We're at the Coral City camera at the Port of Miami. We're inside the intercoastal here, and yet we've seen almost 220 different species of fish. We've got more than 20 different species of coral that are just naturally recruited onto these rocks here. We're going to see staghorn corals that are thriving.
Hard corals.
Hard corals, yeah. Endangered species of corals. We've got Orbicella, the star coral. Lots of different brain corals. Of course, the staghorn corals that we're going to see, which are naturally occurring here. And so 2 years ago, we had a really bad bleaching event in South Florida, and a lot of the staghorn corals bleached and died. The strain that you're going to see here didn't even flinch, didn't bleach. What's interesting about these staghorn corals is the zooxanthellae that is living in them, the algae that actually does the photosynthesis, is a strain called Duristinium, which is associated with heat resistance, but is rarely found in staghorn corals. This is just like a living laboratory here, where we're actually putting these corals through the stresses of, coastal pollution. We get really hot water temperatures in the summertime. We get cold water in the wintertime. There's a lot of human influence that's here, not to mention the fact that the habitat itself is basically entirely man-made. So, where we're sitting didn't exist. This has all been dredged up out of the bay here.
All right, so now I'm fascinated. I got to see these things up close. Let's scurry down this rock jetty
carefully
and get in the water while I don't get swept away by some current. All right, here we go. But first, Jimmy has to be a smart.
Hey Mark, do you need this pool noodle? I know you don't have a BC that you can fill with air.
Jerk. All right, back to the action. See, he's not kidding. There's a channel marker, and massive cruise ships and freighters come right by that buoy. Here's some brain coral. That's probably Davy Jones' locker. There's lunch if I'd only brought a spear gun. And as promised, some sargassum that can house stinging hydroids, and of course a gorgonian or two. But wait, there it is, the Coral City camera. Colin gives it a good scrub, so it's ready for my big moment. And right by the camera are some hard corals that if I accidentally kick them and break them, everyone tuning into the camera will see. No pressure. So we've got a continuously streaming camera where anyone can tune in, hard and soft corals growing, and the occasional sea creature that swims by. That's cool. After doing the obligatory freshwater rinse, all while dodging a beehive in the sprinkler control box, I headed to the Miami Coral Lab to see what else Colin is up to.
Did you get a nice shower to get all that sargassum and city water off of you?
Yeah, I feel like a new man.
Well, come on inside the Miami Native Coral Lab, and I'll show you what we got going on in here.
Let's go. Hey, blue lights. Now I feel at home.
Now you're at home. So this is the Miami Native Coral Lab, where we are growing corals that are native to Miami. Currently we are growing out photosynthetic gorgonians, which of course here in Florida the gorgonians are a really important part of our reef system.
Yeah.
They tend to not get as much love in the reef aquarium hobby, perhaps because they're not fluorescent, but they are really great for adding movement to your tank.
They're not necessarily the most colorful corals for your reef tank, but I found them to be very hardy.
They're very hardy. They also look great under white light spectrum, so if you've got a Fowler also, like
Jimmy's got a Fowler tank.
Well, it's perfect for tanks that have big fish. They tend to be a little bit tougher with the angelfish don't really do too much damage to them, so they're really great. Plus you can really appreciate the flow in your tank.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's really nice. A lot of them have really great polyp extension. We're really not growing them for the aquarium hobby. These are the plugs that we're using. So these are called coral locks. and they're basically look like an aquarium plug, but you can see that they have a screw on the bottom.
Yeah, they're threaded.
They're threaded, and so we are growing the gorgonians on these for a project of which I'm co-founder and the scientific director, called the Reef Line. And the Reef Line is going to be a 7-mile long artificial reef just off of Miami Beach that you can swim from shore, where the artificial reef structures are designed by artists.
Okay.
So they're going to be sculptures, and basically, gorgonians are not the easiest thing to transplant.
Yep.
With staghorn corals, they have a stony skeleton. You can use cement, and they'll pretty much stay where you want them to. The gorgonian, they bend. They're in a lot of current. So we really need to get them growing down on these plugs. And then basically when we're transplanting them onto the reef line, all you have to do is screw them into the receiver side. So there's
steady.
and it stays perfectly in place. So we don't have to use any epoxy or glue or cement to attach it. And we're going to be able to have school kids out there planting corals, and the public will be able to. We want to give them about 4 to 6 months where they're going to grow that tissue down, and let's take a look at some of that, what that looks like. You can see how
it's not going anywhere.
It has fully grown down over the plug, and that's going to be nice and secure when we put this out onto the reef line. That's not going anywhere, and then of course it's just going to start growing up. It's hard to appreciate in the blue light, but this is a really nice bright purple color. So even though they don't have the fluorescent colors, they still have really nice natural colors. And nothing like the smell of gorgonian in the morning. It's has a very, very strong odor. And each one of these trays holds 69 of these plugs. And the trays themselves are actually designed to fit inside an igloo cooler. So literally we can just take a whole tray out, tray goes into the igloo cooler, cooler goes on the boat, then the tray comes out of the igloo cooler, goes underwater.
We're not tailgating with beer, we're tailgating
with corals.
With corals and gorgonians to help saving the reef.
Yeah.
How's that?
We have 2,200 of them for the first installation. It's going to be an underwater traffic jam of 22 cars made out of concrete. And then we are going to plant 100 of these gorgonians on each of the cars. So basically we're going to have a traffic jam underwater, artificial reef, that's then going to become fully colonized and grown over by a forest of gorgonians. And I think that there's a lot to be said, artistically about sea level rise, fossil fuels, sitting in traffic and sort of wasting away our lives going to work. But then this idea of nature being able to take over, Miami going underwater, potentially with sea level rise in the future, all of these corals that are just sort of waiting for the tide to rise and start growing on what is effectively an artificial reef. This is why we call Miami the Coral City, because we are on the 3rd largest reef tract in the world. Most of the cement that we have in our buildings here is literally recycled from marine organisms that produced this limestone hundreds of thousands of years ago, and then we grind it up and we turn it into concrete, and we build these buildings. And when you think about corals are the original real estate developers of planet Earth. There used to be a reef off of Miami Beach, but they built the beach by adding a ton of extra sand, and that sand, as you can imagine, just went down and totally smothered the natural hard bottom, and we lost what was originally there. So the reef line in these cars, we're going to go on top of the sand, up out of the zone where it's tough to live. It's hard to grow as a coral in sand. And with like the sandstorms whipping back and forth. So these cars are kind of like coral heads themselves, and so it really makes a lot of sense, even from a scientific perspective, to have these structures looking the way they are.
So all these gorgs are going to go onto those cars.
Yes.
So you brought some in from the wild, you fragged them down, they've grown out. We're aquaculturing them to put them back on a reef restoration project.
Correct, yeah. And so, because what happens in the wild with a gorgonian is they keep growing bigger and bigger. And the bigger you get, the more drag in the water you encounter. And so the end of the life of a gorgonian is basically growing too big and there's a storm that comes, and they get ripped off of the reef, and then they wind up washed up onto the beach, and you can find them on Miami Beach. You find the skeletons usually. So a lot of these actually, when we do harvest them from other colonies, we're only taking less than 10% of a colony.
Sure.
We're actually trimming them, which probably gives them more time to grow back. But we are also working with what we call gorgonians of opportunity. When we find the loose ones that are no longer attached and will probably wind up, they start getting damaged and they have dead pieces of their branches, we can just cut the healthy parts out, and we can give them a whole new lease on life when we attach them to the coral locks.
Is that like a fruitarian where you only eat the fruit that falls off the tree? You're only harvesting the corals that sacrifice themselves by falling off?
They call them corals of opportunity is the official term that scientists use to describe, corals that are kind of no longer attached to the reef. So,
and you and I both know that you could frag down a gorgonian, leave plenty, it's going to grow right back. You're not causing any damage to this gorgonian. Maybe even, like you said, extending its life because you're trimming it down.
Exactly.
And then we're growing it out and putting it right back on the reef.
Yep.
So these are soft corals. Gorgonians are native.
Yep.
I was on the reef yesterday. There's some hard corals that are native down here.
Sure.
You don't have any of those just yet.
Yeah, so our goal, we've applied for permits through FWC to get a special activity license to work with these stony corals of opportunity. Like as you saw today at the port around the Coral City camera, sometimes those corals, they break off or they're undermined, they fall off of the riprap, the boulders, or the seawalls, and we'll be able to rescue those corals. And as I was mentioning this morning, one of our big questions is, okay, we know that these corals are scientifically, we've proven that they're more resilient.
Yeah.
We've published papers. I've co-authored a paper in Nature. We're working with NOAA we studied the corals. They looked at the genomes, and they're expressing genes that are associated with resilience. But if they're not spawning on time because of the urban light pollution in the environments where they live, then maybe they're not passing their genetics on to the next generation of corals. So what we want to do is we want to be able to bring them into the lab here, spawn those corals, settle babies, get thousands and thousands of corals, and then eventually we will be outplanting those onto the reef line and nearby reefs in Miami and studying and hoping to find that in fact the resilience is passed on to the next generation. The other thing that we're really looking forward to do when it comes to stony corals, because today you saw we have so many different types of brain corals, and those are being worked pretty well by other scientists. You've got the CNATs and the Peakleys and the Peasters. The scientists they use these abbreviations for all the different scientific names, but there are a handful of stony coral species in Florida that aren't being arced, they're not being researched, they're not being restored or biobanked. And so like hobbyists, one of the most iconic corals that you can have are the scoles from Australia. We know the bleeding apple and the master scoles and the war paints. They're really very popular, but they're single polyps, and so the state doesn't really consider scoles to be a reef-building species. And so here in the Caribbean and Florida, we have our own species of Scolemia cubensis.
Okay.
And so Florida does not consider that a reef-building coral because it's just a single polyp.
Right.
So there's no research funding. They're just kind of being forgotten about. And so we want to be able to bring them into the lab, arc them for genetic purposes, and because they are susceptible to bleaching and they're susceptible to disease. And with all the great work that Jamie Craggs has done with the Australian scoles, there's a clear path for us to understand how we can spawn them ourselves, which maybe restoring them, putting them back into the ocean is not quite the same as elkhorn and staghorn, but certainly from like a genetic and from a scientific perspective, it's really valuable work. There's a handful of these species that we sort of feel like we can fill in the gap where other organizations and universities don't have the funding or the resources to work with them. Okay. That's something that we can do, and hopefully it's something that aquarists can also appreciate, since they are what we call LPS corals.
Right.
which are, you know, sort of the more iconic ones that we like to keep in our reef. But
Yeah.
the problem, of course, with LPS corals, they tend to grow slower, and asexual fragmentation is not usually the best way to grow them. It's tough to frag a scolie.
Yeah.
So if you can spawn scolies and you can produce, you know, hundreds of them at a time, it's definitely the direction that we need to be moving as a hobby for these LPS species is you know, is trying to get some sexually reproduced scolies and acanthophilias and, you know, these types of species that are subject to over-harvesting. But how exciting it could be to take like 2 master scolies and spawn them and produce, you know, genotypes and phenotypes that nobody's ever seen before.
Right.
Or even to hybridize, you know, take an Australian and an Indonesian, you know, coral and spawn them and produce, you know, corals that you would never find in the wild. So
Right.
I think that that's the future of the aquarium hobby, is going to be, can we make new corals that don't exist in nature? You know, can we hybridize them? Can we take parents from different parts of the world and, you know, make new corals and find the really colorful morphs of those, and then that, you know, we can grow those out. Which does remind me, you know, over here we've got Rickordia Florida here,
Yeah.
from Miami, some blue Rickordia. We've got some blue and green Zoanthus sociatus, and then these 2 bright highlighter green yellow things. They're called snake polyps, which is a type of zoanthid. It's something that many people have never seen before. They don't grow particularly fast, but
You look at it and you think it's going to be a leather.
it looks like a leather, and it's so incredibly bright. You know, I've never seen ones that are that chunky. They're really, really, really.
And these are all collected on the reef.
These are all local to Miami. Yep, yeah.
Wow.
These are all native to Miami. So, you know, we have more than the Gorgonians. I mean, there's people often say, oh, Caribbean corals are not colorful. You know, you just have to know where to look, and you also have to understand that when you're in the ocean in shallow water, it's like when you have all your white lights on.
Yeah.
So if you look at these corals at night with the same blue lights, the fluorescence of our local corals is pretty impressive, and we do get scolies that are red and pink, and we get you know, the Montasteria cavernosa that are red, pink, and gold, and then of course a lot of our colors are coming from like the rock flower anemones and the zoanthids and the corallomorphs like the Rickordia. So we have color here, not quite as much, but you have to realize that in the Caribbean we have maybe about 65 species of stony corals, and in the Indo-Pacific there's 10 times that many.
Yeah.
So we just have less biodiversity overall here, which sort of makes sense that we don't see quite the same level of color and diversity in the actual species themselves.
Colin, you don't own the building. The lights don't come on for free. You got pumps.
Yeah.
It takes some funds to run this thing. How do we support you as a hobby? How do people support you?
Well, you know, you can buy. We sell merchandise. You can go to the Coral Morphologic website. Go to our store. We sell everything from apparel. You can get your Coral City camera gear. You can get Coral Morphologic gear. You can buy prints. You can buy you know, coffee mugs. You can buy all kinds of different stuff. But then, if you want to be a super supporter, we do accept donations through the Coral City Foundation, which has a financial fiscal sponsorship from the Key Biscayne Community Foundation, which is a 501c3. So they're tax-deductible donations. We also can take PayPal donations, or you know, we have a link at the top of. If you go to the Coral City Camera YouTube, the top of the chat, there's a link. Of course, I just encourage everybody to tune in to the Coral City Camera. I mean, just that alone is really great support. Tell all of your friends and family. You know, we want this in all of the schools. We want, you know, we hear from teachers about how powerful it is. You know, it gets kids engaged, and it's really a great way to get them to fall in love with the underwater world. I mean, it's such a non-invasive tool. When was the last time you watched an underwater film and the fish were swimming towards you? You know, it's like, it's such a cool thing. Plus, there's the added bonus of you don't know what's going to swim by next. So, you know, a lot of kids kind of can get bored just looking at an aquarium. They see all the fish and they're kind of like done after 20 minutes. But like the Coral City Camera, it's like you turn away, you might miss the manatee or the shark, or you know, it's kind of like.
You've seen these on the camera.
All the time. Yeah. We probably see at least one manatee a day, and we usually see multiple sharks a day. So it's sort of like this like lottery, or it's kind of like, when you go fishing, you can spend hours with no bites, and then all of a sudden you catch that fish, and it's like makes the whole day worth it. Like, so it helps teach patience, because it's like, that's also what appreciating nature is, is being able to relax, but at the same time, it's stimulating and it's engaging, and like you never know what's going to come by next. So we just hear great things from parents and teachers of kids that are alternative learners, that are on the spectrum. It's like a really, really great, powerful tool. So if you got a fish room and you got a screen, you can just have that up on the wall too. So you can, we don't really get a lot of Caribbean like biotopes and Caribbean fish and Caribbean coral in the aquarium hobby. So it's a great way to kind of like get connected with our local ecosystem. And stay tuned. Hopefully we'll be able to like start growing some more of these gorgonians that we have here, and maybe be able to supply some into the aquarium hobby.
And if you're an aquarium manufacturer, you said you accept donations.
Yeah,
as well.
we certainly can utilize donations. We have most of the makings of our calcium reactors here, but we need to get some, the carbon doser, the solenoids, and there's a variety of other different things that we could definitely benefit from. Hopefully, when next time you come here, we're going to have the 400-gallon Caribbean display up once we have our permits to have the stony corals. There'll be spawning corals. So, any support is great support, and we're always really happy to have sponsors from the hobby. You can see behind us 2 little fishies, Julian Sprung, literally the goat, and such an amazing person that supported us, and we use all of his products, which are always great. And big thanks to WAMAS, the Washington Area Marine Aquarium Society. They hosted me last year. I gave a talk, and they had some money left over from their MACNA, and they donated $12,000 to this lab, which is one of the largest donations that we've gotten, and that's coming from a club. So that's really, really amazing. All of that. I think that what I like is to bridge that gap between the world of science and the hobby. And the hobby has a lot to contribute, and so the more that we can foster that, I think is a good thing, and we want to be able to help that. So any support that we can get from the industry, from clubs, from reefers is like really, really great.
We'll take it. Well, we're happy to support you at SaltwaterAquarium.com.
Yeah.
Appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you, Mark.
I'll come back and watch the camera while I'm not here, but when I come back to Miami, I'm getting in. I got to scrub it down.
Right.
Learn how to hold my breath better next time. Thanks,
Fantastic.
Colin, for your time.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, have a safe drive.